Big fan of your work, big fan of Wicked, and a big fan of Jon as a whole. This is your fourth collaboration with Jon. What is he like as a creative partner? And would like to know what is something that he taught you that you will take on to future projects.
Well, John is the dream collaborator in that he gives me voice as a artist and as someone who needs to express themselves through their craft. And that seems very strange when you talk about editing, because I think a lot of people feel like editing is a very technical tool. But in fact, my choices and how I work with him as far as use of music and working with animators to create layers. I feel like I'm building a collage with my edit. And so John just gives me a lot of freedom to explore the edits and working with our artists and getting in there with my music editors and my composers and I honestly feel like a co-parent in all the films that we make together. I just I'm sitting there nurturing these children and bringing them out into the world. And so he's just and by the way, it's not all like we feel like he feels like a brother and it's family, but we also have fights, and we can it could be a safe space um to challenge each other and to raise each other's bar and not always agree on things. And that's a really great thing with working with any director, because you don't want to be afraid to pitch an idea or try something that's out of the box, and we have to be willing to compromise and work together. And so he's just the perfect person for me. We also the films that we love together, films like E.T. and Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back, and then big musicals. All these films of our childhood. That created wonder and a reason to go to the cinema, is something that we're interested in the films that we make together, and also the messaging as well. The thing that he taught me was not to be afraid to dream big. I think we've heard that a lot from a lot of it, but yeah, not to be afraid to chase your dreams and to dream big and to think about the canvas and to go for it and not be afraid of failing, and I think that really rekindled something inside of me when we found each other in Crazy Rich Asians. Um, I was not at a low point, but I was at a place where I was just not sure if I was going to even make films in the film industry again. I was starting to do a lot of TV, which wasn't bad. But I didn't know if I was going to be able to make films that were going to be seen on the big screen. And can I make something that's romantic and grand and classy? I just and when I met him, I just saw a kindred spirit. So every time we're together, he's a very inspirational figure. You hear him speak, and it's not like he's speaking like that every day in the edit room, but he's pretty inspirational. And so he just brings the best out of me, and hopefully I do the same for him.
I've known Jon for multiple years now. I think it's extraordinary where his career has gone. I think that he is one of the most inspirational people in the industry because he has such that kind of like that story of like there's no way this guy's gonna make it sort of thing. And he just continues to climb the ropes and he just gets bigger and bigger. And the projects that he's taken on, I just remember going back to walking up to him at Gem and the Holograms and talking about it, which I remember like that movie, like critics destroyed that movie. And I thought like just some of the sequences in the movie, like the musical sequences, like they were so brilliantly shot and captured. And people couldn't look past because it wasn't the Gem and the Holograms that they expected. But they couldn't see the visual flair and the style and like the filmmaking that he really brought to life with that movie. And then, kind of going from Now You See Me and obviously the Justin Bieber, all of these things. And but the thing that really cemented it for me was like In the Heights. Like when you see the In the Heights and you see some of those scenes, the pool sequence, the up the wall sequence, and you just see this stuff fully realized. You're just like, this is a visionary filmmaker who's going to be around for a long time. So to hear him say that, he has that favorite story of his, my mom and dad with the Chinese restaurant kind of story. And hearing him at the premiere and then thinking about that, I can only imagine how all of you must feel to be part of something that is become such a cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I have a very same kind of rags to riches storyline in that, I'm a son of a plumber, and while he was asking me to dig ditches for to put in a sewer line, I was also I was like, I want to just draw my movie posters, of Jaws and Star Wars, and so to be on the other side of that, like I've always felt like a misfit and an underdog, and then to just keep scratching away at this, and just kind of like prove people otherwise, I just think that is I just love that. Like we always feel like we have something to prove with everybody, with the critics, with the studio, with the audience. Like we keep, we're scrappers. And so yeah, to then be, having the number one movie in the world, and celebrating this just amazing film about craft, that just celebrates craft. And 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 even in the editing, like I just feel like Wicked just feels alive in the edit. It's not like warts and all, like it's not perfect by any means, but what film is, or what piece of art is. And I just love all the messiness and humanity that's all built in that. And like I see John as like part Spielberg and part Robert Altman. Like it's, he's like an actor's director that just likes the messiness and brings out like just really honest performance. But then there's a wonderment about him as well. And I think I'm kind of that person too. Like I'm just kind of like connected to like really human things, no different than when I was working on like Raising Victor Vargas, like my first indie film, that I cut. Um, and but then I want to make these big epic, you know, um, you know, uh, you know, scale films, that inspired me when I was a kid. So very much a mutt. I'm very much an underdog. I'm not sure if I'll ever feel any different. I don't think that will ever change. I think it's just built into our DNA. Um, but what is fun is that when John and I met each other on Crazy Rich Asians, I was like, I'm, I'm, I'm in it with a filmmaker at the right place at the right time, and we're gonna raise each other's bar, and we're gonna make some really amazing work together. I know it, and it's definitely proven right.
No, no doubt. So I have to ask, how many hours of footage were there for this?
There was 250 hours of footage between the two movies. Um, and we shot, it was block shooting, like a episodic television, where one day we're getting no good deed and the other day we're getting popular. And sometimes we would be getting a scene from part one and in the morning, and a scene from part two in the evening. And so it was very schizophrenic, but it was a mountain of footage pouring in. I was definitely drowning. And I'd had help from my friend Tatiana Regal, who's an amazing editor, who's cut like I Tanya and Cruella, and we go back from working on like the 3D concert movie years ago. Um, and she helped me because John really wanted to see both movies a couple months after we were done with production. So we were tasked to show him both movies. And then, we put that second film away for a year while we finished the first film, and then we reopened it up in January and said, "Okay, what do we have here?"
This question might be a little bit controversial, but I do want to ask, how many different edits of the film were there?
Oh, it's hundreds. I mean, it's not a controversial question because that's the process, it's not born out of the camera,
Right.
it wasn't a necessarily the film that was scripted was going to be the final version. We did a lot of restructuring. We did a lot of subtracting of performance and shortened musical numbers. We actually, there's this birthday party scene that we famously picked up later in the process that was originally scripted, but we didn't shoot. And so there was a lot in, it was a year of really working pretty hard trying to crack this thing. And the main reason was that it was so different from the first movie. We didn't have the delight and the wonderment and the comedy and the lighter tone of the first movie. So we were trying to figure out strategically how to, balance all that to the very end, to the very, very end.
Is there a particular cut in a scene or a scene that you cut that you fought to have in the movie that stayed in the movie? And then is there one on the opposite side that got removed that you're like, oh, that was a good decision.
That was fought against my will.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll start there first. You know, the there was there's this one of my favorite scenes in the entire movie is this betrayal scene between Fiyero, Elphaba, and Glinda, where Glinda is finding out the true nature of Elphaba and Fiyero's relationship, and I love it because it's sort of like in the first film in the throne room when Elphaba is putting everything together about the wizard and Morbo. It's really meaty melodrama, and for editor, like for me, those are my favorite type of scenes because it's all about looks and silences, and it's not about the lines. It's just about movie stars looking at each other and feeling the sort of the sort of soap opera, the plots unfolding, the portrayal. It just feels wonderful to me when I get to cut those kind of scenes. However, there was a bunch of comedic lines in the middle of the scene that made me laugh every single time. And some of those lines were actually canon to the Broadway stage show. And Mark Platt and Jon M. were like, and even the studio, they're like, we can't have those lines. It's undermining the seriousness of the scene, and also, we're delivering on this moment with Ari during this moment with Glinda, where we just stay on her in one shot, and so to crowd that with some comedic lines, which felt so satisfying to me, like every time we screened it, like it made people laugh. And as an editor, I like to please, right? I like to give people, and so I lost that battle, and it was the right decision, 100%. But those are tough calls sometimes, when you're fighting for, what you think is going to please an audience, but it might be counterintuitive to the bigger picture of a scene. Um, the thing that I fought for was really this idea of how to deliver the ending into an emotional conclusion, just to make it feel like a saga. And the original edits were very bumpy because it just felt like we had 20 endings, and the film really finishes emotionally in a lot of ways with for good, so we knew that scene was working, and but we have a lot of plot lines to tie up, and we have a lot of we have the moment with Morbo, we have the moment with the wizard, and then we go back to Munchkin Land. And then there was a debate about how much of Fiero slash Scarecrow and Elphaba to have when the big reveal happens. And then there was an even more additional dialogue there that just felt like we're now sitting in there explaining um, a lot of things that we didn't necessarily need to happen. So I was very adamant at just trying to streamline and strip it down and build more emotionally to the end of the film. And there's even a piece of dialogue that's used as a voiceover from Elphaba, which is, no one can know that we're alive. No one must ever know. That was part of a bigger scene, and so, and it wasn't necessarily a fight. It was just me, putting together for John and Mark, 20 different versions, where I was just like trying to make it more and more elegant, because I was just like, this has to feel like the end of a classic, Hollywood, movie from, like the end of Sound of Music, or I don't know, just sort of like, Casablanca. Like it just has to feel timeless and classic. And I didn't want it to feel bumpy. I just wanted it to feel elegant and beautiful and emotional.
Given the number of hours that you had to cut the footage from, given the amount of detail that, still, I think we all can kind of agree, as much as we all love Wicked as a whole. A lot of the problems that people and fans have noticed about it, of like kind of like lack of character development in the second act and the buildup of story, you can only do so much. And then there's that, also the other problem is that there's the purist aspect of it, where people are like, oh, we don't want to have changes, we want it all to be the same. So it's sort of like an uphill battle, and that's sort of like when I was reading these reactions, I'm sort of like, what do you guys want? Like what do you want? Like it's like they added some stuff to it. They tried to flesh certain things out, and it does a much better job. I mean, I'm saying this as someone who's seen the play so many times. It
Mhm.
does a much better job of like building these characters in the second act than it does on the show. I'm sorry, it just does. But at the same time, I'm still hearing all these people kind of coming out and saying like it's not enough, and I'm like, guys, what do you want? You're complaining it's too long. Why is it two movies? And then you're like, there should be more detail to it. So I just want to say from me to you that I think you should be very happy with the final cut of this movie. And I think that you did the best job you could, given, the restrictions you had with it.
Thank you. I feel very proud of where we ended up with, and that was not from the lack of trying a lot of different versions, trying to satisfy all the things that every single audience member. And by the way, we're not just servicing the purists and the critics, but we're servicing people that know The Wizard of Oz, don't know The Wizard of Oz, like musicals, don't like musicals, people of every age, super young people to, you and I to our, grandparents. And so, threading that needle for for a big audience was, always sort of our, that, if we're gonna have a goal, that's it. But this is the thing, like this movie, this saga, this film is all about this relationship. And if we deliver that, none of this, nothing else matters. The plot, the characters, the Wizard of Oz, nothing else matters except delivering on this relationship. And I am certain that we did that.
100%.
Uh,
And no one will disagree. I think that at the end of the day, that's actually my favorite part about everything, is that no matter what criticisms people have about this, almost everyone, like universally agrees that the two relationship, which has literally been the heart and soul of the book, the play, and now the movies, works to perfection.
and then you look, I also want to, I have a lot of pride in that. No different from Andrew Garfield being nominated for Tick Tick Boom,
Yeah.
or Cynthia and Ari being nominated for Part One. I have a lot of ownership on my craft and how I helped craft their performance. They definitely gave me the gold, and John gave me that. But I am simpatico for the celebration of their craft as well. And so I'm very proud of what we did, and I also feel like, I remember when I watched Return of the Jedi when I was 13 years old, and I was like, I don't know, this is dark and it's way too much from, like my 13-year-old brain couldn't quite handle, having jumped from Empire Strikes Back. And I have a feeling that, people are going to warm up to this who may not be there right now over the years. And I do think that the melodrama and the darkness and the things that we try to do in this movie, by design will be something that they connect to over the years.
I kind of agree with that as well. Last question, because I got Pablo waiting for me.
Okay.
I want to ask this, and I'm talking both of the films here. Which of the musical numbers was the most complicated to edit?
Oh, goodness. It is probably Defying Gravity will always be the most complicated because it's because the stakes were so high about delivering that. And I think that starting and stopping that song so many different times for dialogue pieces and keeping the audience really gripped and delivering that sort of, again, this Empire Strikes Back ending, that it feels satisfying, that it was, editing live vocals is very challenging. No Good Deed is no different from that as far as like the scale and epic nature of it. um I think that, so I think that Defying Gravity will always, be the most proudest achievement as far as like, delivering to the fans what they want, but also the technical aspects. I'll just add that, sometimes musical numbers that aren't very complicated, like even for like For Good, which is all about intimacy, are just as complicated in a way because it's all about performance. And any it's like playing a classical guitar for me. Any false move just makes it all fall apart for me. And so, but at the end of the day, it's, Defying Gravity for sure.
Amazing. Perfect. All right. It's always good to talk to you. Hopefully, I'll see you maybe next month if you're in town. Come over and hang out at the Creative Arts Awards with us.
I'll be there. I think it's you celebrate us, we're going to celebrate you. So I'm really looking forward to it.